everybody, and welcome to episode 23 of Gamers Without Borders. This is TestZero, and with me, of course, are my two assisting party members, Saboteur Ozzie Arcane and Ravager Johnny Chase.
You're giving
Waffles.
me an mage class?
Oh, no, they're DPS. Today's...
Alright. But that puts me in the same league as Hope.
Or...
Hope you know that. I'll just stalk behind you for 20 hours with a switchblade and not use it.
No, you have to have a very big boomerang.
Yay.
Be softly and carry a big boomerang. Today's episode is a very important and somewhat frightening topic for all of us. The preservation and restoration of video games and content that has been lost to time. Johnny, you recently did a vlog about this, but why don't you start with what you have to say?
Sure. I did a recording of this on my own channel, just something that happened to me a couple weeks ago. What happened was I was just hanging out with my friends. We were going thrift shopping, and then we decided to go to a pawn shop that I usually frequent. Sometimes they do have retro games here and there, but they mostly deal in new stuff. But every once in a while, I'll find like a little gem here. And we thought we had lucked out on some old Game Boy games. He had found Super Mario Land 2, the 6 golden coins. I was fine with it because I already had it. But I had found Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Back to the Sewers. This is a good find because I don't really find a whole lot of Turtle games on the Game Boy around these parts. So I picked it up. It was only $4. He picked up Mario, and I got it home. I plugged it into my SP. No go. When it boots up, the Nintendo logo is all pixelated. That's just also to indicate that it's not going to boot up, but that there's a connection problem. I've got tools here. I've got a security bit that will allow me to open up Nintendo, Game Boy, Super Nintendo, and 64 cartridges, and I got a separate one for Genesis as well. So I opened it up and I cleaned the contacts out as best as I could, because sometimes you get it into just the crevice of the cartridge itself. It doesn't really work all that well. So I opened it up, I cleaned it out, no go. I think I did it 3 separate cleanings, and there was no way to get this clean. And I looked a little deeper, and from my perspective, it looks like some of the gold contacts have been stripped away, probably just from normal wear and tear, taking the cartridge out, pulling it out, putting it back in over the years. And that kind of made me sad because
they're like 20, 25 years old. That stuff just
point,
happens.
Yeah. And it made me sad because I'm like, okay, this is one less version of this game out there in the world, and I know everyone's going to be like, oh, just emulate it.
Well, either emulation or a lot of these games are available on Virtual Console.
Except for licensed games.
Yeah, especially around Turtles, because I know that the earlier Turtle games, like the ones on the NES, Super NES that were on the Wii Virtual Console, are no longer there due to licensing. Turtles, the arcade, and Turtles Reshelled are no longer on Xbox due to licensing as well. Reshell, I'm fine with. Arcade, I really am kind of upset that no one's going to be able to play the actual version of that. Because the only other way you can play Turtles Arcade now on any type of console is getting Turtles 2, the 03 Foxbox remake, or not remake, but the reboot there. They had several games, and if you get the second one, it has the original arcade, but not completely, because again, licensing, they can't put the sound effects in there, so they had to remake their own sound effects, which kind of sucks. But going back to the Game Boy games, I told this to my buddy, and he got a little worried because he hadn't tested out his Mario Land 2 yet. So he tested it out, and he said, oh, it's not working here. And I'm like, all right, no problem. Bring it over tomorrow. I'll crack it open with my security bit, my screwdriver, and we'll see what happens. And also, we'll probably talk about this later on as far as battery saves go, but his girlfriend brought over her Pokemon Gold, because those batteries are notorious for dying out. So I was able to replace those, no problem. But the Mario Land 2, for some reason, the Nintendo logo would come up, but it would fade to white, and then would not boot the game at all. I opened it up again, I cleaned the hell out of the contacts, dried them off, still no go. And the contacts weren't as bad on that one as they were with Turtles 2, but apparently it was just enough for it not to boot up the game.
And yeah, most people don't really. A lot of people will argue that cartridges are much more durable than CDs, but even cartridges can have a tendency to eventually break. Most people have probably experienced, like, if their disc snaps in half or something, or they step on it or run over it on their chair or something, and it's broken, and it's just gone, or they encounter a scratched disc. I talked about in the last podcast where my Fallout 3 disc was scratched, and now there's content on that disc that I can't access. And that's the problem when you're dealing with something that's digital. And if you have a book or something and part of it gets damaged, yeah, you can't really read that page as well, but you have the entire rest of it that works. It doesn't stop you from reading the rest of the book. If you have like a VHS or something, it'll kind of go fuzzy at that one particular part of the scene, or it'll go stretched or warped, but then it'll kind of work back to normal. It doesn't really work so much with DVDs, which is also very digital. But again, with DVDs, you kind of can find most of these movies online. It's a lot easier to find old movies than old video games, I think.
Well, actually, here's an interesting thing. Well, it's easy to find old movies, but with TV shows, one thing as a DVD collector I've noticed, if you don't get a TV show on DVD relatively soon after it comes out, it will go out of print, and it will be expensive as fuck to try and find it. There's actually an anime, Fighting Spirit. It's a boxing anime. It's not that old. It came out in the 2000s. If you want the first set, the cheapest one available, brand new, sealed on Amazon, is over $3,000.
Fuck me.
Wow.
Is this series worth $3,000?
No. I'd pirate it instead before I'd pay that. Because you're not even paying the publisher at that point. You're paying some asshole on Amazon.
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, you want to support these companies that made this. They put their heart and soul into it. They put their sweat and blood into making this show, and you want to watch it. You want to enjoy it, but you don't want to give this other asshole $3,000. So what the hell are you going to do? The same is true for a lot of video games. If it's not available on something like the Virtual Console or Xbox Live or anything like that, you have to either emulate it or you try to find it used. If you buy it used, that it's just going to whoever originally owned it. And a lot of these games, people know that they're rare, so they won't sell them for anything less than like $200, $300.
Of course.
Just because you want to play this game, and even if you've heard that it's great, but you can't play it.
Of course, there's another problem with old games where even if you can get a used copy of it, if it's one that has a save feature, you have to worry about whether or not the battery is going to be able to hold the saves anymore. Like a good example is Arcana for the Super Nintendo. It's not on the Virtual Console. I have the cartridge, but the battery's dead, so I can't save.
Yeah, that's something that's starting to happen with a lot of the earlier cartridge-based games. Is the save feature just doesn't work on them. Which, again, that kind of goes back to our older thing where if you have a password, you don't need to worry about that. But, yeah, when the save feature isn't working anymore, that really is a pain for a lot of these games. Yeah, you could try to beat it without that, but for an RPG, that's like 20, 30 hours without turning off your system.
Yeah,
especially for something like Final Fantasy II. I remember renting it from Blockbuster when it still existed.
Final Fantasy II, the American or Japanese?
Final Fantasy II /4 on Super Nintendo. So playing that, I didn't even know the concept of battery save. I thought maybe it was just the cartridge itself because I couldn't keep a save saved on that cartridge for more than 2 hours. Like I could turn it off, turn it back on after an hour, and it was still there. I'd leave it off overnight. I'd come back and I would have to start the whole thing over again.
That is so weird.
And this was back in the day when Super Nintendo games were still readily available to rent. So this was like mid-90s when the N64 was still around.
Died by then.
Sounds like sounds like it was probably a defect with the like they must not have gotten the battery in properly when they put the cartridge together.
I remember Final Fantasy II was somewhat buggy in that regard. Like sometimes you'll just turn it on and it won't even go to the load screen. It'll just start off. It'll just start off with the music and the airships flying back to Baron. That's what happens if you have no save save files on there. And it's weird. It's like, what the fuck? What happened? Then I turn it off and restart it, and then it would give me my save menu.
Of course. One thing I want to point out is I do know it is possible to replace the batteries. However, I'm not going to try to solder things because I know it's way too easy if you make a mistake to accidentally ruin the game for good.
Yeah.
Well, what I've done with the Pokemon games, it's actually if you don't want to solder it, there's actually another way around it. First thing you got to do is open it up with the security bit. The batteries are soldered in, but they're very, very weak solder points. So if you get micro screwdrivers used for glass lenses, not glass lenses, hinges, things like that. It's like very, very small screws. If you can get it wedged in there and just very, very, very carefully push it through, you can break the solder points. There's 4 on a Pokemon battery, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. Now, if you can do that and not bend those metal pieces, then you just replace the battery and then just tightly wrap it around with electrical tape. That solves it. You don't have to even worry about soldering. I don't know if it's the same contact points in Super Nintendo games, but I know for Game Boy games, because I actually did it with I thought the battery was the issue with the Mario Land 2 that my buddy bought, so I actually took the battery out and tested it. There was a full charge, so there was nothing wrong with it. So I just put it back in and without any problems. I don't know if that's the case with Super Nintendo or NES games, but I found with Pokemon, it's very, very simple to replace that.
I don't think it's the same because I've heard it's considerably more complex. Although people came up with a somewhat simpler solution so that you wouldn't need to solder the thing every time you need to replace the battery. Because somebody actually came up with a holder for the battery that you could solder in so that next time you need to replace the battery, you can just pop the old one out and pop the new one in. But
how often do they expect people to do that?
But I'm still not and the thing is, I don't trust people who claim to do it for you if you pay them enough to send my games to them and know that I might not see my game again, particularly if it's one of the more valuable games.
Yeah, you just gotta hope that there's someone locally in your area. So I know there's one game shop in my area that will do repairs on old consoles. I don't know if they do battery repairs, but I do know that they can do repairs on old consoles for a fee, and they're pretty good about it.
It really is one thing that really kind of bugs me about a lot of about just as a video gaming historian. All these stuff that came out back then, usually if you hadn't picked it up, if it was like an obscure game or something that didn't become insanely popular, it's really hard to find nowadays. And you talked about something like Mr. Gimmick. It's a very rare. I'm not even sure it was released.
It wasn't released in the U.S. It was only released in Europe and PAL regions.
Right.
And in Japan on the Famicom. It was never released overseas. I know, but people have made NTSC format ROMs that they can flash onto these ROM chips.
Wouldn't it run slower or fast? It would run faster on NTSC.
I think they have some way around it. I know with the Nintendo World Championships reproduction card I have, technically isn't supposed to work on the chipset, but I think he's figured out some way to program the ROM to work with that and with the manual dip switches that is on it.
So yeah, that leads us into people that make reproduction cartridges. Because if you can't get the actual cart, a lot of these companies will make reproduction carts for you. That's basically the game, and then they will put ROM hacks on these cartridges. I saw somebody who posted a picture that they recently bought 4 Super Metroid ROM hacks, and they all had custom artwork and everything, and they bought cartridges for that, and they can play it right on their system, which I think is really cool, because basically these people made a Super Nintendo game that you can put in your system and play it. That's a very different feeling than playing a ROM hack just on an emulator.
Yeah, and with one company that I mentioned in my vlog, it's called RetroZone. The website is retrousb.com. They're the ones that specialize in doing these reproduction and ROM hacks, and even original games. I mean, this is the company that distributes the original game Battle Kid Fortress Apparel, programmed by one guy. He's actually got a sequel out now, Battle Kid 2. It's basically, if you've ever played I Want to Be the Guy, the game, it's that, but in NES format.
And good.
And very, very good. I'm actually, once he gets his stock back in, I'm actually looking to pick it up myself. Now, here's the thing with him. His stock's not readily available because, unlike other places that do reproductions, he does everything brand new. Brand new casing, brand new labels, brand new circuit boards, and ROM chips. Most of these sites, one in particular, NESreproductions.com, requires you to send in a donor cart. They want you to go out and actually physically find a copy of the game and chipset that they need in order to make this game. I'll just pull up one at random here. Star Trek V, which was like a prototype that never got released. The games that they request are like A Boy and His Bob, Addams Family, Adventures of Lolo 3, Back to the Future 2 and 3. It's just this weird list of games. I learned from one guy, it's just depending on circuit boards and chipsets like that. Like, only certain games will work on certain chip boards.
Yeah, which I understand, because a lot of times they have like different mappers, or they have they're based on similar architecture, so you can swap the ROM out bit for bit, and you would need to have a similar cartridge to that. But the problem with that is these are also games that are being destroyed, essentially.
Yeah, and one of them that if you actually send this guy this game to make Star Trek V, you are fucking stupid. This guy actually wants people to send him copies of Snow Brothers to make Star Trek V. Snow Brothers is like a $200 game. It's like one of the rarest out there. And if you want to send it to him, just you can have Star Trek V. Go right ahead. I know a bunch of collectors. I'll be asking for your head on a pike.
Yeah, it's different as seeing it as a collector than seeing it as a casual player. But there's a lot of times that this stuff really does come back to bite a casual player in the ass. And we're not really seeing it so much for the earlier games, but games from like the 2000s, even up to like present day, like mid to late 2000s to present day. An example right now is like, it's not the game itself that doesn't work, but there's certain things in the game that you just can't access anymore. The most recent one I came across was I'm reaching the end of Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, and the only problem is there's unlockable content in it, but you can only get it through friend vouchers or friend tokens. You get like regular tokens, gold, silver, bronze, just by playing the game and completing achievements, essentially. And then you can use those tokens to unlock special features. But there's extra tokens that you need, green tokens, that you can only get if a friend sends you a friend token voucher through the Wii Connect 24. And Wii Connect 24 just shut down last month. So I cannot access these features on the game just because their online system is gone. They don't support the online system for the Wii anymore, with all these features where you trade messages to other players and stuff.
It's kind of like how if you had a certain game on the Xbox, you can't get the DLC anymore, the original Xbox.
Right.
Yeah. With the original Xbox, with the Xbox Live shutting down for that.
Yeah, like when Xbox Live shut down, there were people playing Halo 2 for like a month afterward, just having the same game going, and the internet was rooting for them. Like, yeah, go. You're up to 26 days. Go one more. And I think eventually they got like beta access to like Halo 4 or something.
I think it was Reach, because that was around the time that the servers went down for
whichever the newer
Xbox.
one was.
It was whichever Halo was out. Bungie was like, hey, thanks for keeping this game alive. Here's early access to Reach. Try it out. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, that really kind of sucks, is when the servers go down and there's nothing you can do about it. This is through no fault of your own. I mean, yeah, you could argue, why did I wait so long to play the game? And I can argue why it doesn't matter. I should be able to play a game whenever I want. These things don't exist for a limited time. They shouldn't exist only for a limited time, I think. Because they put so much work into these games. They're meant to be played. They're meant to be played as part of a series that continues the story for Metroid Prime 1 and 2. And recently, I had to find myself a GBA link cable to connect to my Wii so I could unlock the stuff in Metroid Prime 1. It doesn't do anything to the game, but it's content that I wouldn't be able to access otherwise.
I can think of another one that's no longer accessible, and it's due to licensing rights, and that's the DLC for Marvel Ultimate Alliance on the 360 and PS3. You can't get the characters like Doc Doom. Oh god, the other ones are escaping me right now. But
Venom, Hawkeye.
Yeah, you can't get those unless you've already purchased them and they're in your download history. You can't get those anymore. And it sucks because there are DLC achievements for Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 for having the characters talk to their doppelgangers. So, like, there's one for Doctor Doom talking to Doctor Doom near the end of the game.
You do realize you said Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, right?
Did I?
Yes.
Oh. You're probably thinking Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Yeah.
Freudian. Another thing that really kind of bummed me out was the original Demon's Souls. I really wanted to play that game, but I didn't have a PS3. I still don't. I'm hoping I'm getting one soon, but that was one of the games that I really wanted to play on it. But when they shut down the servers, a lot of the multiplayer aspects of the game went with it. And from what I understand, the multiplayer aspects were a pretty big part of the game, like reading messages from other players and stuff. So
Yeah.
I know these companies can't be expected to keep the servers up forever, but it really is just kind of disappointing when there's content on these games that are only accessible for a brief period of time. When they stopped the daily updates to Super Smash Bros. Brawl, where they stopped giving out like the new stages every day. They stopped accepting stages from submitters.
I remember what I was going to say. You were talking about how, why am I suddenly playing the game now? And I was going to say, well, what if you've been playing the game the entire time? Why should you just suddenly be told you can't play it anymore?
Yeah, well, that too. I mean, it's like with a lot of MMORPGs, we run into this kind of problem. There was people that bought like a lifetime subscription of Star Trek Online, and then is it still around even?
Star Trek Online's still going, but Star Wars Galaxies recently shut down because LucasArts didn't want to bother having more than one Star Wars MMO, and they were currently about to release Old Republic when they did that. So they would not let Sony Online Entertainment renew the license for it. Basically, it had nothing to do with subscribers or anything else. Basically, Lucas is like, you're done playing that game. I'm George Lucas.
Could you
I
imagine
like
if you were just getting into it like that week?
Oh, that would have been bad.
Yeah.
But the absolute worst one was City of Heroes. It was still profitable, and they just decided,
It's not profitable in our region. Screw them.
we don't like that we don't like that it's not profitable in Korea. It's only profitable in the U.S. We're going to cancel it and release some Korean MMO in the U.S. that no one's going to care about.
One of the few Korean MMOs that was actually very profitable in the U.S., I might add.
Well, yeah, nothing NCSoft does has really caught on in the U.S. aside from City of Heroes, and they canned it.
The only other one that got canceled, but no one really cared about, was The Matrix Online.
Right. No.
Well,
that's another thing. It's like, the thing is, I never played The Matrix Online, but if you got really into the Matrix movies and fandom and franchise for some reason, and you wanted to kind of look at everything Matrix related, good, bad, or indifferent, that would be one thing that you wouldn't be able to have access to. It's just like when I did the Kirby retrospective and I talked about Kirby's Toy Box. These were games that were only available for a very brief period, but programmers still put their time and effort into making them. And I feel like they would want these games to still be played and enjoyed, even though nobody can get them anymore.
Yeah, there have actually been some really bad cases with MMOs. There was Hellgate London, which had a huge controversy because I think they offered a lifetime subscription, and the game shut down after 3 months because the company went bankrupt.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of, Hellgate London.
And actually, the funny thing is, NCSoft has a huge track record of shutting down MMOs, because they've actually shut down a total of 6, most of which were within the first year that they came out. Most notable ones were Auto Assault, and Tabula Rasa was particularly bad because Richard Garriott worked on that.
Oh, yes, Lord British himself.
And they fired him and tried to lie and say that he resigned because they didn't want to pay him stock options. So they forged a resignation letter from him and posted it on the forum while he was in outer space.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, bad move, NCSoft. That was bad.
Yeah, it's he kind of had an alibi to prove that he didn't write that.
Like, well, you could have posted it while you weren't in space and then put it on a timer. I didn't fucking resign.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
Are there any other games that you had? Because I remember there was one really cool thing, because they would often pack in stuff with these things that you couldn't find if you bought it used. And and these features were actually important for playing the game. Metal Gear Solid did this, where if you didn't have the casing, you couldn't see the frequency from Meryl, and you couldn't continue. For some reason, it's always frequencies with them, because they had Star Tropics, where you had to find the frequency to the submarine to continue. And they actually put it in the virtual console, they put it in the documentation. And you actually have to you have to use the Wii remote, drag the letter into the water and hold it up, and you get the frequency for it. I thought that was really cool because they didn't have to do that. They could have just said the frequency is blah 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 blah, but they added a tiny little. You would hardly even call it a mini game, but it's just a little thing that just adds that to it. I thought that was really cool because even though you can't play the game the same way that it was intended originally, you have this other alternative. And I feel like a lot of games, once they're shut down, they don't give you any alternatives to that.
No, they don't.
No.
There was actually a particularly huge outrage over something a few months ago, or maybe, it might have been last year, because GameSpy got bought by a new company.
Yes.
And they just randomly decided to not honor their agreement to host games or to host servers for a ton of games. I can't even remember what was on the list, but it wasn't pretty.
I know that the Star Wars Battlefront games were part of that. And that kind of sucks because I bought one of them on Steam with part of like a Star Wars sale. It was like 75% off these games. So I was like, Battlefront 2. I haven't played that in a while, and I can't play it on Xbox Live because they shut down those servers. So I'll play it on the PC.
Oh,
nope.
those servers as well.
Yeah, well, and part of their argument was GameSpy's argument was, well, if you have so many people that are using the servers, the company has to pay more. And their argument was that that the companies didn't pay them the fee to keep the servers going. However, there was evidence that a lot of these games they shut down were under the bandwidth usage, so they didn't have an excuse to shut the servers down. So they basically lied and said, we don't want to pay for these, close them down.
We wouldn't be so mad if they wouldn't fucking lie. I mean, if you just want to be an asshole and say we're shutting it down because we don't want to pay for servers anymore, yeah, we'll hate you, but at least you're not being a lying son of a bitch about it.
Well, yeah, the fact that they did that pretty much guaranteed there was never again going to be any, like, there is no way any publisher will use GameSpy for their hosting services again instead over something like Steam or Origin.
And that's the thing that kills me about it.
Origin is a preferable choice than another company.
That's what kills me too about the whole thing is that everyone's like, well, if we want to play Battlefront 2, why don't we just transfer over to a different server? It's like, you don't understand. They built the game around GameSpy's infrastructure. There's no way around it. Well, unless someone wants to build a very elaborate mod to change server addresses and all that, or I don't know. Like, I think with it, because I haven't booted it up in a while, and I think with Battlefront 2, you have to sign into GameSpy in order to even play multiplayer.
Yeah. I know they did that with Borderlands. Borderlands required GameSpy.
And it's a problem because a lot of the games that lost their support were old games. They're games that at this point are no longer being supported by the company that published it, so they're not exactly going to go back and patch it to make it work on something else.
Yeah, because a lot of these people that worked on these original games, because some of these games are fairly old. I mean, there's these Star Wars games that are like 10, 15 years old at this point. I mean, Halo 2, when did that come out?
Oh God, you put me on the spot. I want to say
a long time ago.
04, 05. Very long time
almost
ago.
10 years ago. And a lot of the people that worked on this, they've moved on to other companies, if not other projects. And whose responsibility is it to update this thing for future usage, really? A lot of these companies, they don't care. Some of these things only last maybe 1 or 2 years online. And these are the kind of games that tend to come out every year, like your Maddens, your CODs, your stuff like that. And once the new game comes out, most people don't give a shit about the old one anymore, and they just move on to the newer servers. Even if you particularly liked like certain aspects or weapons in an older version, too bad. Buy the new one. You have to adapt. You have to adapt or die.
Yeah, it's pretty much kind of sad because I actually I liked Battlefield Bad Company 2, but I hate Battlefield 3. I couldn't get into it.
Same thing with me, like with the Halo series. Like, I haven't played 4 yet, the story mode, and I haven't played multiplayer. I haven't even played it at all. Just something about the multiplayer for 4. It's something about it, just the way it looks, the way I think it plays, just so off-putting. I'd rather stick with Reach or 3, because at least those servers are still up. I think for 3 anyway.
I don't think Microsoft would shut down any of the Halo servers until they actually start shutting down stuff for the 360 in general.
Well, 360 still got at least 5 years. They've said they'll support it for the next 5 years while they're dealing with Xbox One.
While they're trying to convince you that you need the new system.
Yeah.
Well, like, similar to that, have you ever run into a thing where this is all mostly, for the most part, multiplayer? Have you ever run into a situation where the single player actually loses something due to the fact that the game isn't supported anymore?
I can't really think of anything particular except for some of those games where they were really trying to push you to buy the new copy. Where like let's say Dragon Age Origins, for instance. If you bought that new, you got a insert that allowed you to get an extra party member and to gain access to an extra dungeon to go through. But those download codes had an expiration date on them.
Wonderful. The one that comes to mind is a very obscure reference, but the original Who Framed Roger Rabbit for the NES, they had a phone number in the game that you had to call in order to get information on how to continue. That number has since been changed and now links to a phone sex hotline.
Classic AVGN moment.
Well,
yes.
Now we know what Jessica Rabbit was really doing.
And yeah, it's funny, yeah, but if you're playing the game and you don't know how to do it, what if you don't have access to something like GameFAQs? I mean, yeah, nowadays you can just access GameFAQs and they will give you the information that they would have given you. Same as with the frequency to Merrill or the frequency that you need for the submarine. But you're still referencing an external source. These games required you to access something that was not part of the game in order to continue.
And the worst thing is, there could be instances where a game is obscure enough that nobody put an FAQ for it on GameFAQs.
I ran into that problem as well. I was playing the Japanese version of Tetris 2, which had a puzzle mode, and where you had to choose the specific blocks to play in particular order, and I was stuck on a level, and I wanted to look up a walkthrough, but because nobody had ever played the fucking game, I couldn't find any help anywhere. And it was a fairly old game. It's not like it was new and nobody had gotten around to writing it. If anybody was going to write it, it would have been out already.
Yeah, and similarly, if you're looking for anything for Commodore 64, there's no FAQs for any of those fucking games on GameFAQs.
So yeah, stuff like Star Wars Galaxies and City of Heroes, do there still exist independent servers where you can play these games on?
No, well actually I think there are for Star Wars Galaxies. People made an emulation server. But with City of Heroes, NCSoft has said that anyone who makes a server to emulate the game, they said they will sue them.
That's really kind of a dick move. It's their only crime is taking away viewership that they wouldn't be getting in the first place.
Yeah.
And their only crime is loving this game.
And one of the huge problems with an MMO is that's not a case where you just bought a $60 game and then you can't play it anymore.
This is the case where you spent $15 a month, $15 a month, and you put all this time into your character, and you had all this effort put into it, and it's just gone. Yeah. So I think it's unfair to both the developers and the players when these things get cut off, because the developers put all this content in the game that they wanted people to discover and experience, and then the players put all their time and effort into the game, putting all this gaining all their stats, boosting themselves up to level 80, and then hope you had fun, goodbye.
Yeah,
it really is. I can't imagine how frustrating that would be.
Well, yeah, and like I said, NCSoft has such a huge track record of doing shit like this. That's why I don't care how good people say Guild Wars 2 is. The fact that it has their name on it, I will not touch it.
I heard it recently went free to play.
Guild Wars 2 is always free to play, but you have to actually buy it.
Yeah, I heard there was another thing where you don't have to even buy it. There's a trial mode or something.
Yeah, but in any case, they've done this shit so much that it's I can't trust to play anything they put out. I'm not going to invest time into a game that's just going to get shut down because they're a bunch of assholes. Speaking on older games, because earlier we were talking about the save game states and cartridge games. One thing I'm actually kind of looking forward to, although I don't know when they're going to release it because they haven't said when they're going to release it, is a system called the Retron 5. I think Johnny knows what I'm talking about.
Yep.
I know about the Retron 3, and apparently there's a Retron 4, so there's a Retron 5 now? What does that add?
They're skipping the Retron 4.
Oh.
Yeah.
They announced the Retron 4 and then canceled it the next month and announced the Retron 5.
Let me see if I can get the release date.
But what it has is it has a port for NES, Super NES, Genesis, Famicom, and Game Boy Advance games. And it's going to
that's interesting because I would love a system that you could just play portable games on your TV. Because it's like a lot of these games are good, but you don't want to have to be hunched over that tiny screen the whole time.
And the other thing is it's going to support an HDMI cable. It's going to have smooth filters to make it look better on an HD TV.
Awesome.
And it's going to have save states. So if your cartridge has a dead battery, you can still save.
Or if you just want to cheat.
Yeah. That's the interesting thing. And I saw the guys at RetroWare TV doing a story on this at E3 because they had a booth at E3. It's so strange that they're going to have actual emulated tools, like stuff you get in an emulator, like save states and, fast forward, rewind in this console for cartridges. That just blows my mind. Another thing, too, is that not only this, it's for GBA, it has the GBA hardware in it, so it will be able to play Game Boy and Game Boy Color as well.
Awesome. Wow,
Yeah.
I might have to pick this up.
Yeah, it's actually, they are suggested retail price is going to be $100. I don't think they've confirmed yet whether there's going to be its own Bluetooth headset, or not headset, sorry, Bluetooth controller. I think that's going to be included with it, but like the Retron 3, it's going to have controller ports for all the various systems.
Yeah, it'll definitely.
And they haven't. I was just looking online. I don't see a release date.
What's the option for the Game Boy port though? Because you would need a separate controller for that.
I would assume you'd be able to use NES controller because they had the same buttons.
Plus L and R though.
Yeah. Oh, the SNES. Because you could use that with the Super Game Boy attachment for the Super Nintendo.
Would it also have USB for like a USB controller?
I'm not sure.
They should have that. They should add that in because I have USB Super NES controllers.
I mean, I was gonna say it'll definitely be a better use of $100 than buying an Ouya.
Yeah. Anyway, getting back on track, I suppose. There's also stuff that they give it to you in the sense because they gave it to you free. So they gave it to you free, so I guess they feel they could take it away at any time. And a lot of these games seems to do that. It's like you get a special thing if you get on like the first week that it's online, or you buy it on release date. You get a special deal. You get a special equipment that really doesn't affect how the game plays. But for like a super completionist, it really is kind of pressure to get the game as quickly as possible.
Like the day one achievement for the Xbox One.
Yes.
Yeah. Ordering on your Xbox or on Xbox.com, you'll get an achievement. 0 points. I don't even think I could do that here in Canada, so I didn't even bother.
But of course, like we were saying, once these games are shut down, people will find ways around it. There's people that still play Phantasy Star for the GameCube, which the server sent down a long time ago.
Well, actually, people did quite a few interesting things with games on the GameCube, because the GameCube was the first Nintendo system that actually had an adapter to play games online. So there were actually a couple games aside from Phantasy Star Online that used it, but didn't use it for online because that was actually the only game that had online play on the system. But there were some games that allowed LAN play.
Yeah, like Double Dash had that.
Double Dash.
Was also Animal Crossing.
Yeah, people.
I don't think Animal Crossing had the broadband. It had the game legal, but that actually brings up something with Animal Crossing. There's the classic NES games that you can get on there.
Oh yes.
For doing certain stuff, but there's also games that you can only get with the e-reader card slot thing for Game Boy Advance and linking that up and swiping cards.
Yes, and if you can't find one of those, if you can't find an e-reader or these cards, I mean, you could kind of download them off the internet and scan them in, but that would be the only way to unlock these things that are in there. And there are like complete NES games in there. There's like a library of like 12 NES games hidden in that thing. Yeah.
They also have, that was never released by any other means, Super Mario Brothers and The Legend of Zelda are on Animal Crossing.
And
the only way to get that,
because the cards were never released.
You actually
cards never came out.
You can get them. You just have to use an Action Replay or a Game Shark
Yes,
to get them.
they're right there on the game, and you can't access them. I mean, yeah, these are games you can get other ways, but it's content that's on that disc. It's contained in that disc, but you can't get to it. That is so goddamn frustrating. It's almost like they did with Pokemon Red and Blue, where every Pokemon was in that game because it had to be. That's just how it was coded, but a lot of them didn't exist in that realm. They just weren't there. A lot of when you don't have a chance of getting one, and if you wanted to get both of them, you had to trade with somebody else. That's what was kind of so brilliant about Pokemon, was they forced people to be a lot more social. But of course nowadays, if you want to play like the actual Pokemon Blue cartridge and get all the Pokemon on it, you're gonna have a hell of a hard time, because not only do you need to get the Game Boy, you need to get a link cable, another Game Boy, and then the copy of Pokemon Red, and then you have to trade all those things through to yourself.
I was actually discussing that with my buddy's girlfriend when I was fixing her copies of Gold. She had a copy of Red that we thought was dead, but turned out it was all right. Then we actually were trying to scheme up ways for both of us to have all 3 starter Pokemon and then trade off the other ones that we didn't have. But that would require me playing the game and starting up a new save file like every few hours. And I didn't know if I want to put that much busy work into it, but we'll see.
Yeah, what I was going to say is the way people are probably still playing Phantasy Star Online is the same way they're playing Mario Kart Online, where they came up with a program to put on their PC so that their GameCube sees their PC as another GameCube on the network, and it allows them to trick it into thinking they're playing with another person when they're really playing across the internet, when they thinks they're in the same house.
So you're using something similar to Hamachi, where it mimics using a LAN, or it mimics using a wide area network as a local area network.
Yes.
Yeah. Like what people did with Halo 1 and XConnect, so that they could play over LAN.
Yes, people created XConnect before there was an Xbox Live.
Yeah.
Of course, there are parts of, even doing that, there are parts of Phantasy Star Online you can't access due to the fact that the online part is down, because there were actually lobbies you could walk around in the online portion of the game.
Does these lobbies have any like in-game lore information? Or stuff that you would be missing out on without being able to play it?
There were stuff you had to go into the lobby in order. There were like missions you could download and shit that you couldn't get to otherwise. They weren't really that important, but it's still something that it's gone now because they're not there.
Yeah, and yeah, that's all these things. They really just still kind of bug me when that kind of stuff happens. I mean, yeah, you can't overthink this stuff. There are going to be games that come and games that go, and either they become popular or they don't, or people decide to continue supporting them for some reason. I mean, there are games that came out 20 years ago that you can still play online now, just because they gave you the option of like direct connecting to another player, or or people can run server software. And stuff like Minecraft, that's going to be future-proof.
Yeah.
Even if Mojang goes down, you're still going to be able to play Minecraft. There's going to be people that you can pirate the game off of them. You can play online because they're running the Minecraft servers. With a lot of these companies, you're not going to be able to do that. I mean, City of Heroes, they said if anybody else runs a City of Heroes server, they're going to sue them. It's like, we want this game dead. We don't want your money. In fact, we're going to take money away from you if you try to make people happy.
Yeah, and stuff like this where stuff's just gone is part of the reason why everybody was afraid of the Xbox One with its original policies that they were going to have, where, you have to connect or you can't play your games. Well, what happens when the servers are gone?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it in terms of, that's not for a while. That's not for 5-10 years. We have games from almost 30 years ago that still work fine. And people are going to realize that, and there's going to be this dead zone between like 2010 and 2020 that's a whole era of games that cannot be played simply because the servers are gone. And then after that, people are going to realize, oh shit, we need to start future-proofing this stuff.
But by then, it'll be too late because you'll have already given the companies your money. But luckily, everybody punched Microsoft in the face until they said, okay, we won't do it.
but they can't just flip a switch.
Flips a switch.
So yeah, it's something that we really kind of feel strongly about, that these games are meant to be, I'm kind of repeating myself, but these games are meant to be played and enjoyed. Even if it's not your kind of game, you have to appreciate that there is value in these. Even if you don't like Halo or don't like MMORPGs, there's a value in these games to people that do play them. There's a value to the people that grew up playing them. And just because some server that they had no control over is gone, they can never play that game again. You really don't see that with other forms of entertainment. I mean, you could find reprinted copies of books, or you can find new DVDs of movies, or sometimes they might be out of print, but somebody still owns them. And I mean, there are lost movies, like London After Midnight and the old like Nosferatu stuff. Those are lost movies, but they are very few compared to video games. There's a lot fewer lost movies than there are lost video games, wouldn't you say?
I'd say that's probably true.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say here. Stop shutting down our fucking games, people.
And if there's anyone out there that has the technical expertise to preserve some of these games, like I would really like to write. I'm actually thinking of doing this.
If anybody out there actually knows if you do this kind of restoration, we'd love to have you on for an interview, actually.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
I'm actually thinking of writing a letter to the guy who runs RetroZone and RetroUSB.com, because right now there's a giant list of games he no longer does that he discontinues. Some of them being the aforementioned Mr. Gimmick, the Namco version of Star Wars that was only in Japan, an actual physical copy of
discontinued them.
He actually posted it on a forum on NintendoAge.com. It's kind of a retro gaming community that's there. Basically, it's another one of those, I see too many people doing this, then I'm not going to do it. He used to sell actually retro kits to help keep things alive. I would really wish I want to send him like a really like heartfelt email that says, look, please don't stop what you're doing. If anything, you should keep doing this and actually reach out to people. Like I said in my vlog, I have a damaged Dr. Mario that no longer works. It will if I force it, but it only displays one color, and that's blue. You can't really play it. So I was really hope that someone out there who has the technical expertise and has these parts available, I want to be able to say, hey, open up a shop, accept people's broken games. Like, let me send you Dr. Mario. Take the ROM chips out because the ROM is still good. Get a new circuit board, solder it on there, and send it back. I'll pay you whatever you think is fair. Well, just let's not have a whole whack of games just end up in a landfill somewhere just because one little contact is scratched.
Well, the truth is, collectors really are kind of in the minority here. A lot of people, even myself included, I don't mind that I don't have a lot of my old Kirby games because I have Kirby's Dream Collection now. I don't mind that I don't have a lot of my older Nintendo games because I have the Virtual Console, because I have emulation. It's not the cartridges themselves. It is the actual games that I like. The cartridges themselves really are just containers for these things. Yeah, it does kind of suck knowing that your data can go away if you like lose access to your computer or you lose access to those files, but I have memory cards that I have saved games on there. I have my maxed out like 99/59 time Final Fantasy VII that I have not played in years. I have not accessed it in years. If it disappeared, I probably wouldn't notice it until I went to look at that memory card again. But even still, the data, it does not affect me on a daily basis, but knowing that part is gone, that's really the memory that bothers me more than not having access to the actual physical cartridge or disc.
Yeah. The main problem with needing to keep the cartridges around for me, and probably for you, TZ, are for those games that aren't on the Virtual Console, that literally the only way you can play them is to download a ROM and emulate it.
Yes.
If you don't have the cartridge.
Although even still, I'm fairly frugal when it comes to that. I'll usually only buy cartridges if it's something that I really, really love. Like Twisted Metal 2 is one example. And but of course, I bought that when PlayStation 1 emulation wasn't great, so that might have also been part of it. But as emulation gets better, a lot of these games you are going to be able to play them. They're starting to get really good PS2 emulators right now, and there's even PS3 emulators coming out that are still buggy. But I've seen people play like PS2 games on their like Android phone using like a Bluetooth controller. So it's like emulation is catching up. It's catching up to the rest of our computers.
It depends, because the thing is, yeah, they've gotten PlayStation 1 emulation down for the most part. They're starting to get PS2 emulators to work somewhat better. But the sad thing is, nobody has gotten a working Sega Saturn emulator going.
One thing I also heard, the Dolphin emulator for the Wii, they recently added the ability to play on the Wii network with other Wiis, with like actual Wii consoles.
I couldn't get that thing to work properly on my PC when I tried.
I've tried using Dolphin too. I wanted to use it to capture some footage for the Kirby retrospective, but I have not been able to get it to work right. I need to just keep fiddling with it. I suppose that does it for this episode. Leave your thoughts on game restoration and just content that you cannot access just because the game is not supported anymore. It's a sad idea, but it seems to be the truth with a lot of video games. Ozzie, where can everybody find you?
You can find me at planetarcane.blogspot.com.
And Johnny, where can we see you sobbing over broken games?
You can see me crying over broken games at youtube.com/achievementwhorejohn.
And you can find me at TestZero.net, and all of us are available at reviewersunknown.com. Everybody, take care, and take care of your games.
That means don't shit on them.